We should have kept the oil. Donald Trump said that once about another country, but somewhere in a gilded ballroom, you just know he glanced across the Atlantic and thought, heck, how hard could it be over there? Tonight we put that swagger to the test, with a question so reckless, your group chats will try to mute you. Could the United States actually invade Nigeria? Before we go full Pentagon briefing, let's have some fun. Because if you're crazy enough to try this, you're stepping into the ring with the most unshakable army in Africa. No, the most unshakable army in the known universe. Nigeria's tanks don't just roll, they two-step through the savannah, with suspensions tuned by Afrobeats producers. Their artillery is so on beat that when a battery fires, Spotify asks if it can license the track. The generals? They don't plan operations. They play 12-dimensional chess on a board that looks suspiciously like the map of West Africa, and they capture your queen with a logistics spreadsheet. Imagine a US amphibious fleet turning toward Lagos and discovering the real final boss isn't an air defense system, it's traffic. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Unit bogs down on 3rd Mainland Bridge, the battalion commander furiously waving a Waze app while a convoy of Danfo buses cuts across the lane like armoured gazelles. The Navy SEALs attempt to seize a fuel depot, only to be stopped cold by a phalanx of Nigerian antis who negotiate with such ferocity that JSOC requests close air support, in the form of extra jollof rice. And when the first Abrams tank rumbles forward, a chorus of Okada riders surrounds it, honking like a mechanized Vuvuzela section until the crew surrenders and buys everybody suya. We're kidding, mostly. But that irresistible, chaotic energy is part of Nigeria's superpower. It's a country of scale, titanic cities, a population that could fill stadiums from here to the Sahara, and a spirit that doesn't back down. If you think you can roll in, plant a flag, and start reorganizing districts like you're labeling folders in Google Drive, good luck. Lagos alone moves like a living organism. Millions of people pulsing through a megacity that doesn't sleep, just switches playlists. Even getting through the day is a contact sport. Okay, fun's over. Reality check. Nigeria is not Wakanda, and it doesn't need to be. It's a real, heavy, battle-worn regional power with a military that fights often, learns fast, and adapts under pressure. The armed forces have spent a decade plus cycling through counterinsurgency in the northeast, bandit suppression in the northwest, and security operations across the delta and the southeast. That's not glamorous warfare. It's sustained contact with a cunning enemy. Over roughly 230,000 active and paramilitary personnel in total, depending on how you count auxiliaries, gives Abuja reach in multiple theaters at once, and a cadre of officers and NCOs who know what it's like when the first shot is an IED and the second is propaganda. Hardware matters too, and Nigeria has quietly stitched together a mixed arsenal that fits its fight. The Air Force's 12 A-29 Super Tucanos are the closest things to flying scalpels a counterinsurgency could ask for. Long loiter, precision munitions, and radios that talk to ground units like old friends. The 3 JF-17 Thunder give Abuja a faster punch for air policing and strike, while Chinese VT-4 tanks, locally built Azugu mine-resistant vehicles, and a growing lineup from Nigerian defense firm Proforce fill out the army's backbone with gear that can take punishment on bad roads. It's not a top 10 global arsenal, but it's not amateur hour either. It's a toolkit tuned to Nigeria's wars.
Donald Trump says he's asked the US Defense Department to prepare for potential military action in Nigeria.
So, could the US invade? In a purely military sense, yes. The United States is the varsity team that shows up with carriers, cruise missiles, stealth bombers, and enough drones to start a flying car company. A classic campaign would start with space-based ISR mapping every emitter, followed by cyber shaping and a standoff strike package to blind radars, crack open command nodes, and crater runways. Carrier air wings and long-range bombers would take air superiority as a personal project. Special operations units would race for key airfields, Lagos's Murtala Mohammed, Port Harcourt, maybe Calabar, while Marines threaten amphibious landings to force Nigeria to spread its defense. Logistics lines would spool up across the Atlantic. Tankers, pre-positioned ships, and the quiet genius of American warfighting, maintenance Marines with clipboards who can make an engine appear out of thin air. But the map fights back. Nigeria is nearly 1 million square kilometers of everything. Atlantic coastline and mangrove swamps, rainforest and river deltas, savanna and highlands, Sahelian fringe and urban sprawl. The Niger Delta alone is a three-dimensional chessboard of creeks, sandbars, and ambush geometry. A platoon can vanish into reed beds. A battalion can spend a day moving 5 miles. The rainy season turns dirt into syrup. The dry season turns scrub into concealment. And that's before you hit cities that move like living organisms. Lagos isn't a dot on a map. It's a tide. You don't secure it, you surf it, and hope you don't wipe out. Then there's scale. Brutal, democratic, unforgiving. Nigeria's 2025 population hovers around 237 million people, with the demographic engine still humming. Lagos's metro population, depending on who's counting and what you call metro, clears 17 million with room to spare. That's more than many countries. In a megacity that big, the defender owns the alleys, the rooftops, the rumor networks, and the moral narrative. Every checkpoint becomes a political theater. Every collateral damage incident becomes a recruitment ad for resistance. Even if the US wins every open field fight, the cities will chew through patience, budgets, and approval ratings back home. The political board would explode. The African Union isn't going to bless a great power invasion. ECOWAS, family drama and all, does not smile on strangers kicking down a neighbor's door. The UN Security Council turns into a global megaphone for condemnation. The so-called Global South unites around a simple phrase: sovereignty. Allies in Europe would blanch. Rivals would run victory laps on social media. Markets would swing, and not just because oil is spiky. Nigeria's refining landscape has shifted with the Dangote refinery's rise. Domestic output now matters for regional fuel flows. Bombing your way to stable gasoline prices has never worked, and it won't start working in the Gulf of Guinea. Even the staging is harder than it looks on a whiteboard. The US drawdown from Niger in 2024 wiped out a major Sahel logistics and ISR foothold. You can build alternatives on the coast, Ghana, Ivory Coast, others, but overflight permissions and basing politics are fragile in a storm of outrage. Landing Marines is one thing, landing diplomacy is harder. A war of choice against Nigeria would turn basing rights into political kryptonite for any African government. The Pentagon would find its map of friendly runways shrinking fast. Meanwhile, the Nigerian side of the chessboard isn't empty. Years of fighting Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP, taught Abuja grim lessons. ISWAP in 2025 remains lethal, resilient, and bureaucratically terrifying, taxing local economies, enforcing rules, and adapting tactics with alarming speed. That means any invader inherits enemies that already know how to bleed an army and outlast a news cycle. If US forces stay, insurgents pivot from Nigerian uniforms to American ones without missing a beat. The roadside bombs don't care what flag is on the MRAP. The ambush lines don't struggle to pronounce Semper Fi. Civilians, desperate to survive, will cooperate with whoever controls the next checkpoint, then switch sides after dusk. In other words, urban warfare in the south, swamp warfare in the delta, and insurgent warfare in the northeast, all at once. Let's wargame a few US courses of action. Option A: shock and law. Decapitation strikes on leadership and communications, followed by quick seizure of coastal hubs to compel a settlement. History says elites adapt, networks reroute, and the public hardens. You wake up with a hostage crisis called Lagos. Option B: Delta denial. Cut the oil, seize key nodes, and starve Abuja of revenue. Two problems. Pipelines are repairable. People are not. And starving out a nation of over 200 million is a humanitarian, legal, and political catastrophe that detonates your alliances. Option C: Northern pincer. Stage from a friendly neighbor and punch down towards Maiduguri to break insurgent sanctuaries and claim legitimacy. Spoiler: neighbors don't stay friendly when their capitals fill with protesters, and ISWAP knows that terrain better than any outsider. You win the battles and create the insurgency sequel. Now, zoom in on the Nigerian military again. Warts and all. Corruption has bitten, logistics have buckled, and reform is perpetual. But when the shooting starts, Nigerian units can be stubborn, proud, and adaptive. Air-ground coordination has improved, with forward air controllers talking A-29s onto targets with increasing precision. Army aviation is growing. Helicopters are the coin of the realm in places where a paved road is a rumor. Locally made armor, Ezugwu MRAPs, Pro-Force rigs, may lack Western glamour, but they're designed for the country's real roads and real threats. And while a handful of JF-17s won't sweep the skies, they complicate an invader's calculus whenever fighters must operate near Mampad's dense terrain, backed by mobile SAMs and clever decoys. The Nigerian Navy won't win a blue water duel with a US carrier group, but it isn't irrelevant. Offshore patrol vessels like the Chinese-built P-18N Centenary class give Abuja a modest but useful maritime presence, enough to harass, interdict, or force caution in littoral approaches and the oil lanes. The Navy's real strength is coastal knowledge and the ability to work with police, customs, and locals to make amphibious planning hurt. For a US planner, that means landings under pressure and the constant risk of small boat swarms threading the mangrove maze with RPGs and homemade explosives. The bigger the ship, the more embarrassing the scratch. And then there's Lagos again, the world's most charismatic logistical nightmare. Think about occupation tasks: power, water, sanitation, hospitals, ports, telecom, food supply, policing. Those are not annexes to an operation plan. They are the operation. You don't clear a neighborhood once, you clear it every day at sunrise, because it grows back by lunch. Drone overwatch helps until the battery dies and the alleyways win. PsyOps help until someone makes a meme that turns your message into a punchline. This is a country where humor is armor, where mockery becomes resistance. If Iraq taught America that winning the peace is harder than winning the war, Lagos will graduate you to postgraduate studies with tears in your eyes and dust in your lungs. The geopolitics would curdle fast. African publics would mobilize in a heartbeat. Diaspora communities in Europe and the US would amplify every misstep. Rival powers would deliver humanitarian aid with cameras rolling and smug smiles. Even friendly governments would keep you at arm's length to survive their own parliaments. When you need overflight rights, you get hearings. When you need port calls, you get protests. And the longer you stay, the more that coalition thins. Economically, the invasion detonates a minefield. Nigeria's economy is a mix of oil dependency and entrepreneurial chaos. Reforms in 2024 to 2025 liberalized currency and removed subsidies, triggering painful inflation and political heat. An invasion drops a match into that tinder. Oil theft, already a chronic thief of state revenue, becomes a wartime profession. The new refining capacity shifts incentives. If the Dangote complex is pumping at scale, disruptions ricochet across West Africa's fuel markets. If it's paused or targeted, scarcity and smuggling become the day's business plan. Either way, an invader inherits a shop floor on fire, and the cashier is angry. Let's not forget the information war. Nigeria's online space is loud, fast, and funny. Every patrol brings a lens. Every mishap becomes a clip. Every rumor mutates into a narrative. You cannot out-press conference a society that turns adversity into virality before lunchtime. The more force you apply, the stronger the story of resistance. And the more you restrict the internet to stop that story, the more you prove it. That's a trap with no elegant exit. So what happens on day 30? American commanders report tactical successes. Air superiority achieved. Key nodes secured. Pipelines under control. Insurgent cells disrupted. Nigerian commanders report patriotic resolve, consolidating defenses, and mobilizing reserves. On day 90, the US Congress asks why fuel prices spiked and a carrier deck cycle is 2 months longer than forecast. Nigerian politicians ask why food prices are up and call for unity. On day 180, the US debates troop increases. Nigeria doubles down on asymmetric warfare and local manufacturing. cranking out more armor plates and improvised obstacles than any spreadsheet expected. On day 365, the word exit appears in every memo, and the phrase conditions-based becomes a prayer. Could the US win battles? Absolutely. Could it seize ports and airports, smash air defenses and plant flags on key government buildings? Of course. Could it win Nigeria? Highly unlikely. You cannot occupy a continental-scale nation with 237 million people, multiple simultaneous conflict zones, a coastline that favors ambush artists, and megacities that metabolize battalions. You cannot out-sustain a population with infinite patience for lines and finite patience for foreigners. And you cannot out-narrative a country whose default setting is hustle. There's a rule wargamed too rarely. Terrain, demography, and legitimacy multiply each other. Nigeria's terrain fractures invaders. Nigeria's demography outlasts them. Nigeria's legitimacy, home field advantage supercharged by continental outrage, isolates them. By the time the Pentagon's PowerPoints discovered this algebra, public patience is already below sea level. So here's the clean take. If Washington ever chose invasion, the opening week would look like a superpower flex. The next year would look like a superpower lesson. The Nigerian armed forces would bleed, adapt, and keep fighting. Civil society would rally in anger and pride. Militants would pivot their sights, and the world would recoil. The US can break things in Nigeria. It cannot break Nigeria. We started with a line about taking the oil, the kind of swagger that fits on a bumper sticker. But bumper stickers don't survive Lagos traffic. The truth is simple. You can seize a refinery, crater a runway, and block a port. You can even win the battles you pick. What you can't do, what no one can do, is invade a country that fights with both tanks and memes, with antis and engineers, with megacities and mangroves. That's Nigeria's defense in depth. People, places, pride. So, could the US invade Nigeria? Maybe. Should it? Only if it enjoys losing friends, money, and patience on an industrial scale. This is the boss level you skip, not because you're scared, but because you're smart.